Okay, hey YouTube, I'm back again with another video, and this one is answering the questions that were asked on my Facebook wall, for the most part. So, a lot of them had to do with sex and dating, believe it or not, that's what people are interested in. Shocking. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and answer some of these questions that were put on my Facebook wall. So for those of you who haven't seen it yet, it's facebook.com/loosebricks, or you can just go to loosebricks.com and it'll redirect you there. But anyway, the first question was, am I basically looking forward to sex post-op? And I think the answer is, well, yeah. That's kind of part of the reason why I had it. But, it still has to be the right person, and I think if anything, it maybe has to be a better person than I would have had sex with before surgery, which isn't to say that I had lower standards before or higher standards now, just that, I'm turning 30 here next month. I'm ready to be done with kind of that drunk college girl, meaningless kind of sex or relationship type of things. So somebody else asked if I would consider dating people outside of, cis males, or I guess even cis females. So would I date a cross-dresser? Would I date another trans person, either female to male or male to female? Or kind of just any sort of, non-cis binary identified person? And the answer is yes, I would. I actually went on a couple of dates with a trans woman here in Dallas. She was very tall, and she was totally confident and passable and everything like that. But because she was so tall, it drew a lot of attention to her and subsequently to me when I was out with her. And that did make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, kind of, not necessarily being in the spotlight, but getting more attention than I would if I were dating somebody who was not almost 1.5 feet taller than me. And then I think with female to males, I haven't gone out on any dates with them. I've been asked by a few, but it has been my experience so far, and this is not to say that all female to males are like this, it's just that they tend to be a little bit shorter and a little bit more boyish looking. And I know that there are plenty of female to males out there who do not fit that stereotype at all, where they are, you can't tell any difference, not that you could with these other people, but just the fact that, I'm not a big person, and I don't want to feel like I'm as big or bigger than my partner. Just, that's maybe my own insecurity or whatever, just like I don't want to date somebody who's much bigger than me, and draws attention. I don't want to date somebody who is kind of my size or below. But I would consider dating, people who fit into the normal range, or, whatever. That's probably a wrong way to put it. I didn't mean it like that. And other questions include, how would you describe the sensation of dilating or being penetrated? If you've ever had anal before, it's kind of like that, but at the same time, it's, not like that. I don't really know of a great way to describe it to somebody who's never experienced it before, but it is very much like, I don't want to say it makes you feel complete or full or whatever, but when it's there inside kind of filling that hole, there is kind of a, I don't know if it's a calming effect or, a fulfilling effect. I don't know what the right word is, to be honest, but it is kind of this experience where it just feels right. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's still very tight down there. I obviously haven't had sex. I've only been using my dilator. That's not a particularly, sensual type of activity. But, there have been a couple of times when I've been able to move it around a little bit and kind of get a preview of what's to come, no pun intended, for the future. And let's see, scrolling down and looking for more questions here. What else do we have? How hard was it to get through all the obstacles in order to be allowed to have SRS? I would say not, I guess it depends on how you define obstacles and how you define difficult, which I know is playing very much the Bill Clinton semantics game, but like once I made the decision to do it, it wasn't horribly difficult to do anything. Like I've said in past videos, my therapist at the time did not want to prescribe me HRT, but I was able to go directly to the doctor and get it from her. Like insurance kind of put a temporary snag on things, but that was worked out as well. So I was very fortunate, very privileged to have what I think is a relatively smooth transition. I think the hardest thing to learn was voice, and I still don't feel like my voice is where it needs to be. And then presentation, and I think a lot of presentation is unlearning things that you sort of trained yourself to do to fit in as a boy or whatever. Another question I have here is, what worried and scared you the most before, and what now kind of worries or scares me the most after? And I would say that before transition or early into transition, the thing that scared me the most was, thinking that I would never pass, thinking that I would, always get read as trans, and that would create a lower quality of life than I would want. But it turns out that was probably a sort of baseless fear, and now I think probably my biggest fear is that it's probably not even related to anything trans in specific. It's more of just like, am I going to be happy? Because I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist, can be kind of an overachiever, and I'm never content with kind of just the status quo. And that applies to my professional life, that applies to my personal life, and so it's kind of that trade-off between achievement and contentment, and I'm not sure that, I will ever be able to meet that. So somebody else had asked, can I talk about things that aren't trans-related, and there you go, there is something that is not trans-related. Another question is, has SRS made me feel any different about myself, and if so, how? So I would say that the immediate answer is yes. In the short term, I feel very different, but I don't think that's the answer she was looking for. So I think that a more honest answer to if it made me feel different, I think yes, it does to some extent, because it's a really stupid scenario to even think that it would ever happen, but if I were to get read as trans out somewhere, you can be like, well, pull down my pants, you can see I'm not a man or whatever, and that's kind of stupid. Like, that's never ever gonna happen, but it's sort of like that reassurance, that knowledge that there's really nothing there outside of a blood test that you're going to be able to do to prove that I am trans at this point. Like, yes, I'm pretty flat-chested. There might end up being some scarring down there. It's still too early to tell. But, I don't feel like I look that great without makeup on, but, like, a lot of women don't. So, I think that SRS gives me, like, that final kind of confidence boost to, stop worrying about being trans and just, worrying about being the kind of woman that I want to be. Somebody else asked if I would go on a date and then followed up with if I would marry them. The answer to the second one is no, I probably won't marry you. Sorry. And as for the date, I think you said you moved to New Mexico, so that would be logistically difficult, and I believe you're a little bit older anyway, so I'm probably not going to take dates off of my Facebook page or YouTube, although I won't say I won't. I'm just saying I probably won't. Let's see, any other questions? Yes, talking about sex again, somebody asked if I would ever date or enjoy the challenge of a well-endowed man. And so I started out with 5 inches of depth. So to be perfectly honest, like, really anything more than 6 or 7 is probably going to be wasted, because you can't get it all the way in anyway, so 5 would maybe not be enough or whatever, but they're gonna hit the wall, so I don't see any point of bigger being better. At the same time, though, with the dilators, I have noticed that I do enjoy the one with a little bit more girth better than kind of the smaller one, and there are two more still to come that are bigger in diameter, so we will see how I feel about those. But I feel like that is something I've heard cis women say as well, that the length doesn't necessarily matter as much as the girth. And so that also helps it probably hit the prostate, as well as, potentially other things in there as well. So I don't know, not everything down there is healed fully for me to be able to kind of tell how things are going to work, how things are going to feel. But I have no desire to chase after giant dicks or anything like that. Whatever you have is probably going to be sufficient, and to be perfectly honest, I had a guy over one night, and when he took it out, I was just like, holy shit, that thing is, entirely too big. Like, I have no idea what to do with that. So, that answers, I think, all of the questions I have, except for maybe two. One is, was there any organization or source of help or guidance that sticks out in my memory as being kind of the most helpful in getting me where I am today? And no, I don't think there is one that I can think of off the top of my head. There was one individual who a friend introduced me to, who she knew, who was able to talk me through a lot of things. But other than that, like online support groups are helpful, but at the same time, the reason I'm not going to say it is because at the same time it was also, probably as equally unhelpful as it was helpful, in that for the longest time when I was reading it and reading these people's stories, their experiences, I thought to myself that, well, there's no way I'm trans because I don't feel that way, like the way they're describing it. So, it was and it wasn't helpful. I think kind of the most helpful thing was just having my actual friends, my support group, through school, through people I knew growing up, everything like that, who were willing to sit there and listen to me just talk about what I was going through. And I think that's more important than any kind of resource, because really, like, hormones are kind of guess and check. There's some, Googles out there. I would say if there's one resource that's better than anything, it's Google, because you can go out and find, well, what should my levels look like? What are the different options for administering hormones, things like that. So, I think it's kind of a non-answer, but I don't think there was really an answer there, and, I think that answers just about all the questions I had this time, and I'll probably, collect more in 2 weeks or something like that and make another really long mailbag here.